Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Ballot Boxing. This is the District 8 Forum. I'm Shannon Wolfson with KXAN. I will be your host and moderator for this evening. Joining me to watch for questions via Twitter and from the audience is Richard Whitaker there from the Austin Chronicle. Thank you, Richard, for being here. This is one of 11 candidate discussion forums hosted by KUT, the Austin Monitor, the Austin Chronicle, KXAN, and Univision. These forums are designed to give people like you who live in the city of Austin's new geographic council districts a chance to meet and vet the folks who want to represent them. This evening is going to work like this. After this introduction, the candidates will have 1 minute to make some initial remarks. After that, we will open it up to questions from you. And the easiest way to ask a question is to write it on one of the note cards that you were handed when you walked in today. The flag, you can flag down one of the helpers if you have not already given they're raising their hands over there, you see. So they'll be walking around to get your note cards if you haven't already handed them one already. If you don't have a note card and you want to ask a question, flag one of them down also, and they'll be happy to get you one tonight. You can also submit questions via Twitter. The hashtag tonight is hashtag BBD8, of course, for District 8. Want to just get some housekeeping things out of the way. One of them, candidates, we are, for our KUT audience tonight, needing to identify you. So please wait to be called upon before you answer. We will definitely call upon each one of you, but before you speak, please wait for Richard or myself to call upon you. And the candidates are going to have 1 minute to answer each question, and there is a big red clock down here up front that will be counting them down. So just so you all are aware of how that works, and also so you all are aware of how much time you have, just look over there to your right, and the clock will be counting you down. We want to welcome our candidates now. Again, thank you all for being here. You will note that they are seated in the order in which they will appear on the ballot. And now I would like the candidates, beginning with Ms. May, to begin your 1 minute introductions.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for having this forum. My name is Elisa May, and I've lived in Austin for 38 years. I have lived mostly in the South and Southwest area. I began my career here. I came as a student, began my career here as a social worker working for the Children's Protective Services Department. Throughout my time at the state, I went and actually had an opportunity to get my master's degree, and I worked with the Texas House of Representatives, and then later on led a state agency, the Texas Renal Service Commission. Was one of the agencies that I led. I'm very astute, and I feel like I have a lot of background experience as it pertains to budgetary matters, and I will bring that to the table as I serve you at council. Furthermore, I have worked with the Greater Austin Hispanic Chamber of Commerce as well. I was a CEO for the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm currently employed as a Director of Mission Services for the Susan G. Komen Foundation, whereby I manage grants. Thank you.
Mr. Pierce.
Good evening. I'm Darrell Pierce, a candidate for District 8. I want to thank all the hosts for hosting this event this evening. My father, who's a veteran and retired Air Force, brought his family back to Austin in 1981. I say back because I'm originally from Sherman, Texas. So I've been in Southwest Austin for that entire 35 years. Attended Crockett High School, where I graduated, went to St. Edward's University, and started my career at Motorola here in the Oak Hill area. After leaving Motorola, I spent some time at the General Services Commission, where I managed over a $2 billion spend, so I've had some experience in working in government. Went to the private sector, back to the private sector, IBM. I always tell people, if you never work for government, you need to do it at least once in a lifetime. Gives you a different perspective of just how the world turns. Left IBM and started my own practice 15 years ago, which is Snap Management Group, and it's my firm that I own and operate now. We specialize in change management and process improvement for government agencies throughout the entire state. On the civic side, I've been involved on the Planning Commission. I have served on the Austin Boundary Task Force for AISD and on the Austin Public Education Foundation. So I look forward to visiting with you more this evening about my vision for Austin, one team, one dream for one city. And I'm not sure exactly where we are.
Time's up.
All right.
Ms. Bray.
Thank you and good evening. Thank you to all the hosts for hosting us tonight, and more importantly, thank you to each of you all for being here, because after all, you are electing one of us to be your representatives. I like to say I came to Austin the old-fashioned way. I was born and raised here. I'm a fourth-generation Austinite, Graduated from Stephen F. Austin High School, after which I went to Texas A&M University. So shout out to any Aggies that may be in the audience tonight. I got both my master's and my undergraduate degree in civil engineering. And currently I'm a professional transportation engineer, and I have been practicing for over 20 years. To me, that's important because transportation is one of the critical issues within both our district and the city the city at large. I know the people, I've worked with the players, I can get TxDOT, CTRMA, and all those folks at the table. Along with this, I also know customer service. I've managed budgets, I know how to do on-time delivery, and I can deal with people very well. So thank you.
Mr. Scruggs?
Yes, hello, and thank you very much to the Alamo and KUT and the Chronicle and the Monitor for sponsoring this event tonight. It's great to have it right here in the neighborhood. My name is Ed Scruggs. I've lived in Austin for 23 years and in Southwest Austin for 13 years. I came to Austin in 1991 after college as a City Hall reporter with KLBJ AM in the early 90s, very critical time for our city. Also worked in public affairs at KUT Radio before moving into the pharmaceutical industry. Here locally, was part of the group that oversaw the changeover with the Circle C HOA from developer to homeowner control, helped democratize that system and give us a fair vote and expand the board. Also worked strongly on behalf of bonds that ended up building Gariski Middle School, Clayton, and Baldwin Elementary Schools to help relieve school overcrowding. Also been involved in a number of community projects over the years. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope to earn your vote tonight.
Mrs. Troxclair?
Hi, my name is Ellen Troxclair. Thank you so much for being here tonight. How amazing is it that we have an entire sold-out movie theater of people who care about having a voice for Southwest Austin? Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I have about a decade of public policy experience working at the state capitol. I've done everything from constituent relations to public policy research to building coalitions and drafting legislation on topics such as transportation and the state budget. Additionally, I run my own small business as a realtor, and I hear on a daily basis how things like skyrocketing property taxes and gridlock traffic are affecting people's lives, their families, and their businesses, and their ability to live in Austin. I am running for city council because we desperately need a common sense leader representing Southwest Austin. Not only do we need effective representation for our community, but we also need a taxpayer advocate and someone who is going to discuss
Troxclair, I'm sorry, your time's up.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. And I'd like to start with a question from me. What do you see as the biggest issue confronting District 8? And how would you address it if you're elected? And let's start on the other end with Mrs. Troxclair.
You know, I don't know about you guys, but, you know, District 8 has the highest rate of home ownership, and from the voters that I've been talking to, the biggest issue that is affecting their families is the cost of living, including property taxes, utility rate increases, spending. We are just on an unsustainable path. We have a $3.5 billion budget that is significantly larger than other cities such as Dallas or San Antonio, despite those cities having a much greater population. At the end of the day, we all love this city, and we can see why people are continuing to move here, but you and I can't continue to bankroll the growth. We need someone who is going to take a hard look at the budget and refocus our priorities on basic city services. So if you're looking for a taxpayer advocate, I'm your candidate.
Mr. Scruggs?
Well, there's more than just one issue, I would say, but of course, affordability, a major issue facing everyone in District 8. Again, the high instance of high ownership, but also higher income, higher property taxes, which this past spring, if you opened your appraisal like I did, you may have been shocked, that coming on the top of a big increase last year. I'm very worried about our ability in Austin to simply own a home over time. We are going through a percentage of the population that they're moving out because they can no longer afford the taxes and the general affordability. So we need to focus on that issue, and I do favor a phased-in 20% homestead exemption to help deal with that. It's not a magic bullet to solve the problem, but it is something that we can do and something that government can do right now to address that. Affordability affects everyone across the city in different ways. This is the way it affects us and homeowners throughout the city, and we need to do something about that.
Ms. Bray, the biggest issue impacting District 8 and how you would address that if you're elected.
Great, thank you. As Mr. Scruggs said, yes, I do think there's multiple issues, but to me, the biggest issue is transportation. It affects our daily lives, from going to the grocery store, from going to school, from going to work. It is 24/7, 365. You can't get out of it. And I have a few show and tell things. I know you all can't see them, but I'm not sure if you've all seen the strategic mobility plan. There's nothing for Southwest Austin other than a study for 1826. Currently, Capital Metro has 6 routes, none of which really serve down Southwest Austin. There's a few that are time of day dependent, but they don't really serve the needs of our district. I'm a huge proponent of building a Southwest 45. Let's get the Oak Hill Parkway completed. Let's get the South Mopac improvement projects completed. In addition, we've got to expand upon our transit services. We need to expand on Park and Ride. We need to explore the flex time and other opportunities, but I do believe transportation is important.
Mr. Pierce?
I believe there's several issues that are impacting where we live, learn, work, and play. So I'll just highlight one of them, and I do think it is transportation is at the heart of the growth and lack of infrastructure that we have here in the Southwest Austin area. Having served on the Transit Working Group and served on the Planning Commission, I think one of the most important things for us to do initially is do something similar to what was just created in the North Austin plan. We need a master plan regionally that would set the foundation for a transportation study to be done for South and Southwest Austin. And what a study would do would put us in position for funding. But we need to be able to have a multimodal plan to be able to demonstrate how, whether we're talking about improvements at Davis Lane, La Crosse, and Slaughter, an underpass, or whether we're talking about where we want to put bike lanes in the most efficient places possible, or we're talking about where we would like to locate a park and ride. We're one of the few districts that do not have a park and ride in our respective community. And I think we could be an ideal candidate for 2 of those. And the City Council will have an opportunity to elect a member to serve on Capital Metro where we can get that type of representation.
Ms. May?
Well, you know, when I first started this journey about this campaign, transportation was the #1 issue. As we have weathered, if you will, the months of this campaign, I can tell you that affordability has increasingly stepped up in a strong first place. So if I was to determine which are the important issues, I'm just going to do a hybrid and tell you it's transportation and affordability. Because frankly, your transportation issues are affecting your affordability, and your affordability issues also affect the choices that you make with respect to where you're going to live in your transportation. So what can we do about it, and what are some of the short-term fixes? With transportation, some of the immediate things that I believe as a city council that we can begin to do is impact policy by having a 4-day work week. That won't cost us any money, but it'll enable us to get folks out of their cars at least 1 day out of the week. In addition to that, I think having staggered work times would be very helpful. I keep saying there's no reason why everybody has to show up at work at 8 o'clock.
Ms. May, I'm sorry, your time's up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I know you all are here because you want your questions answered. So Richard is handling that part of the evening for us. So Richard, let's get some audience questions.
Thanks so much, Shannon. Okay, we're going to start off with the big one for, I think, a lot of voters around town. The council isn't the only election on the ballot this year. Do you support Proposition 1? And please explain your position. And we'll start with Mr. Scruggs.
No, I do not support Proposition 1. I'm a transit advocate and believe that Austin does need a system, but there is truth to this matter which we just cannot afford it right now. The reason I say that is I have spoken to so many people who are hurting right now, again, trying to pay their property taxes or stay in their homes, and the mood out there when it comes to increased taxes, not a very good mood. And people want something in that plan that does something for the Southwest. We've talked about the problems. The plan currently does not address the Southwest commuter in any way. There's no park and ride in that plan. There's nothing about express routes going to downtown or UT. And it could have been in there. They could have finished the plan. For the past year at town hall meetings that they've had, I urged them, come down to the Southwest and have some meetings, but they didn't do that. So I don't think we can afford to approve the plan at this moment.
Ms. Bray?
Thank you. I'm assuming you are talking about the City of Austin's Prop 1, not the state. And no, I do not support the City of Austin's Proposition 1 as currently written and put forth to the voters on the ballot. And there's a variety of reasons why. First and foremost, to me, when I look at the $400 million that are being put forth in roadway projects, by my estimate, about $100 million of that is to set up for future phases of rail. There's one project in particular for $34 million to build a bridge for the rail extension to the airport. To me, if it's a rail project, it should have been included in the rail vote. So that's one problem. The second thing is as Mr. Scruggs said, it does nothing for District 8. I understand that South Mopac is already programmed, and I understand that the Wyatt Oak Hill is already programmed. However, the city could have put some money forth to expedite those projects if we needed. I also believe that we all read today, or maybe you heard today, that we've got $300 additional taxes this year. With this passes, it will be more. Thank you.
Mr. Pierce?
Yeah, thank you. I am a supporter of the rail concept, but not the current plan. And let me give you my 3 reasons why this particular plan concerned me. One, from a vision planning perspective, I think one of the things the plan lacks is a vision to give us as a community an idea of what would have been the additional lines that potentially would have been connected, that would have connected the suburban communities with the core. And I think a comprehensive plan would display that type of picture. Number 2 was that they combined the roads with the rail. And I thought that that should have been 2 items that should have been separate to give voters an opportunity to choose if you support either one or the other versus feel like it was an all package or none. And the next item that concerned me was the 400 million of roads that was connected to the rail plan. The new sitting council would have no flexibility on how that 400 million was going to be allocated. Less than 10 million was allocated for studies for Southwest Austin, but no new infrastructure. So that to me is too much money to spend to where we wouldn't have had a chance to do some new planning underneath the new system. So those are the core items that caused me some reservation.
Thank you. Ms. May?
I too do not support the rail plan. And the reason I don't support it is because it's going to cost too much and it will do too little for us. If you look at the amount of money that we're putting into it, there is out of the rail plan, and there's 400 million that's going to go into roads. There is one, my understanding is there's one study that we're going to get out of it, and that's a corridor study for 1826. I consistently have said that that study can actually be paid out of our transportation budget that we're already paying into. Currently, every month, we pay into that transportation budget a fee of I believe it's $7.80, maybe it's $7.20. But nonetheless, we're already paying for that fee. There is no reason for us to tax ourselves a second time. So no, I do not support it. I do support a rail in its principle, and I would like to see the city come up with a comprehensive rail plan for the entire city.
Thank you. Mrs. Troxclair?
Thanks for that question. This is going to have such a huge impact on the future of our city and the future of our ability to live in this city. I can't in good faith tell you that I care about your property taxes and I care about affordability of Austin and then turn around and say that I support an incredibly expensive rail plan that is truly not a traffic solution. So no, I do not support Proposition 1. This plan, if built, is going to serve, by 2030, is going to serve less than 1/2 of 1% of the region's trips. So we are not talking about a true traffic solution. We are not talking about truly taking cars off the road. We live in one of the fastest growing areas of the city, and we are one of the largest commuter districts, and we struggle with traffic. But how long have we been waiting for road projects such as the Wyatt Oak Hill? How long have we been waiting for projects such as improvements to South Mopac? We have to prioritize, and I think roads should come first.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start with Ms. Bray with this question. Do you believe that development over the Edwards Aquifer degrades water quality? And if so, what do you propose to do about it?
Great question, and kind of a new one that we haven't been asked in that particular manner before. I do not believe development over the Edwards Aquifer degrades the water quality. I have studied the technological advances for many, many years. And I can tell you right now that the technology exists to clean the water that comes off of the surfaces to nearly rainwater levels. So I think that there are some good components to the SOS ordinance, but I also believe that we need to look at everything on its own, and we need to study and go back and really analyze the impacts. Thank you.
Mr. Pierce.
I'm a firm believer, being an entrepreneur and served on the planning commission for 8 years, that all good developments doesn't mean it's necessarily a good development. So I think it's the type of development that you build over the aquifer. When I was on the planning commission, AMD was a pretty controversial project at that point in time. They located off of William Cannon and Southwest Parkway. And I believe that there's always a way you can identify the best win-win solution with a project. And I think there's a way that you can combine good development with good sound environmental principles. And that was a project that turned out to be a very green, a very clean, state-of-the-art project. And we worked very hard to make sure that they went above and beyond to develop a quality project. So I think when you work smart, I think when you're willing to be a good community partner as a developer, and that was one of the advices I used to always give developers when they wanted to come before the planning commission, I think the two can coincide, but I don't think they necessarily have to be polar opposites. I think there's room for common ground and good development that allows us to be able to protect some of our most greatest natural assets here in Southwest Austin.
Thank you. Ms. May?
In 1992, I helped with the SOS ordinance to protect our environment and protect the aquifer. Those times were very different back then. Since then, fast forward to about 23 years later, we've got a lot of new technology that's come online that we did not have back then. Back in 1992, we absolutely needed to be protecting our water quality, and we need to continue to protect it today. That said, I think that there's an opportunity for us to take a look at how we might be able to use some of the new technology that we have today so that we can best try to implement some possible strategies and using what we can within the limits of the Edwards Aquifer and the SOS ordinance.
Mrs. Troxler?
I think there is a really important balance that needs to be struck when it comes to environment versus development. We love living in Southwest Austin in part because we have great open space, we have great parks, we have great places to go outdoors to spend time with our family and pets and all of that great stuff. But at the same time, the strict, confusing, complicated development codes that we have here in the city are making it almost impossible to do business. It is, and it's also affecting our ability to do things like build new schools and relieve some of our overcrowding that we have in our education system here in Southwest Austin. I do think that we've made incredible strides in technology over the recent decades, and we really need to reevaluate if some of the policies that we have in place are having a negative impact on our ability to keep up with our growth, our ability to do business here, and our ability to have great schools to send our kids to.
And Mr. Scruggs.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Do you believe that development over the Edwards Aquifer degrades water quality? And if so, what do you propose to do to address that?
Well, of course it degrades water quality. Basic hydrology over an aquifer, a porous aquifer like we have, gravity is going to take that polluted groundwater down into the underwater table, and it will impact water quality. And I know from when I first moved here in 1991 that Barton Springs has degraded over that time. It used to be crystal clear, and now there's a lot of algae in there that they can clean up. But of course it does. So I think that means that we're stewards of this land. We all are very fortunate to live where we live in this beautiful place. And we need to use the existing regulations that we have and new technology and always keep that in mind, that we're fortunate to live here. We've been blessed to live here, and it's, in my opinion, the most beautiful part of this city. And I think we need to work within the bounds of the SOS the best we can and use our new technology to protect that.
Thank you very much. And our next question. Recently, City Council voted to make the Austin Utility go all renewable by 2030. Would you have voted for that? And if so, or if not, why? And we'll start with Mr. Pierce this time.
Yes, I would support that because it's a goal, and I think we should make every effort, as it has been articulated. I mean, one of the greatest assets that you want in any community is you want to have a good quality life, you want to have good clean energy, you want to have a clean environment, and I think we should make every effort to expedite our plan to implement more renewables. But I think we need to be smart too, because one of the things we talked about when we're talking about balancing and being good stewards and good leadership, on the one hand, we talk about affordability. And we talk about cost of living. So when we talk about closing some of our plants that primarily are supplied and operated based on coal, we need to make sure that we're not moving so drastically that we're not sure that renewables are, one, sustainable, and then number two, we're not making sure that we create another cost element that for the very citizens we say that we want to protect and make Austin more affordable, that we're driving up our energy costs. So I think that's a great goal. I think we should strive to continue to meet that goal, but to make sure that the alternatives and renewables are sustainable.
And Ms. May?
I certainly believe that trying to have a sustainable environment by having goals that would enable us to have more green energy is certainly laudable. That said, I too am concerned about the sustainability of those costs. I think that as a council member, it's important for us to take a look at how we can implement some of these new programs, but also be at the same time be ready and prepared to come up with those revenue sources so that we ensure that we have the dollars to pay for it, and more importantly, that as good citizens and stewards back to you, that you know and you're aware of what those costs will mean back to you, what those costs will actually end up being to your pocketbook. So by and large, I'm supportive of such green goals, but I also am very supportive of making sure that my constituents, in this case the District 8 constituents, would provide the input and ensure that they knew what those costs were going to be so that everybody was on the same page about what this means.
Mrs. Troxler.
To answer the question directly, no, I absolutely would not have voted for that proposal. First and foremost, because of the way it was handled. I don't know if y'all read the articles. Let me tell you, they were planning on taking up that measure. It was getting late at night. It was about 10 o'clock. The room was packed with people who were concerned about the cost implications that this vote would have. And they said, you know what, it's getting too late. Y'all all go home, come back tomorrow, and we'll take this issue up tomorrow. Just a few minutes later, after the room had cleared, they voted unanimously to pass this measure without the significant input from the public who had attended earlier and who had planned on coming back the next day to voice their opinions. I absolutely think that we have a community that cares about the environment and that we want to have renewable energy goals. We do have very aggressive goals already in place, and I think we need to talk about the $1 billion price tag and some of the other implications that this brings.
And Mr. Scruggs?
Yes, I would have voted for it, although I think it's important to realize that what was voted on, I think that's unlikely to actually take shape in the form that it is. Austin Energy came back last week, reevaluated after this, and said, hey, we can double our renewables, increase the percentage of renewables that we're going to offer dramatically, and it will not cost the $1 billion. And I think there was a favorable reaction to that in the environmental community. That's a big breakthrough for Austin Energy to come through that far. But Austin is a leader in renewable energy technology. This is going to be a new economic sector for us and help us diversify the economy. So yes, I would have supported the goal of being carbon neutral by 2030. Climate change is real, and we can look outside and see that and we can see the video of Lake Travis for the last 3-4 years, and you can't tell me that something's not wrong. So we have to begin to act. Austin has the ability to act, but act within affordability goals, of course. And
Mr. Scruggs, your time's up.
Thank you.
And Ms. Bray?
Thank you, and I'm sorry, can I get you to ask it one more time?
A month ago, City Council voted to make Austin Electric all renewable by 2030. Would you have voted for that?
Thank you. I support the concept of the renewable energy goal. but I would not have voted in favor. And my primary reason why is we as taxpayers are continually having our rates increase. As you open your bill every month, your rates continue to go up. You open your bill every month, your taxes and your fees continue to go up. I think Austin Energy needs to get back under control, and we need to figure out what's going on with Austin Energy. Some of the research that I have done, Austin Energy this year has a $19 million unfunded cost because of the 2% cap that's been placed on it. And that money is being punted down the field. And how are we going to pay for that? That's going to be on the backs of taxpayers. I think we have to take into account the taxpayers before we truly start doing some of these goals or some of these ideas. Thank you.
Okay, and on to our next question. City Council has very limited power when it comes to education, but there's a lot of discussion about how the school can work with districts to improve outcomes. How would you suggest planning to improve student graduation rates and success rates, particularly in low-income schools? We'll start with Mr. Pierce.
I think it's to my left.
Oh, we'll start. Sorry, we'll start with
We
Ms.
want to keep you in line.
Ms. May.
And I want to be fair. I looked at him and I said, hey, I was next. But anyway, don't start my time yet. I'm just talking still. Anyway, please restart my clock. No. Seriously, the question, okay, with respect to AISD and how as a council member we can best affect some of the graduation rates and affect how our students end up coming out of our public school system. Well, first let me say this. I served on the AISD CBOC committee, which is the Bond Oversight Committee, and I had an opportunity I did this for 6 years as their chair, and I had an opportunity to work very closely with the school district. And I got to learn a whole lot about some of the communication that happens with our school district. And I can tell you that through a task force that they already have, there's a joint task force between AISD and the school district, there's some communication already happening there. However, I think that needs to possibly be restructured so that it ends up being very specific to goals rather than it just being a task force that meets to keep each other informed. And so I would take the existing structure that is in place, and I would propose to the folks that are involved in that structure that we actually tweak it so that we're very goal specific, and so that the city, through the city and AISD, we're able to increase those goals. Thank you.
Mrs. Troxler?
You're right. The city council on its own does have limited ability, and we do have an elected school board to oversee education issues in Austin. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, the biggest thing that is affecting our students in the city is our state's funding formulas. Under the current funding formulas, AISD is paying the most amount of money of any school district in the state back to the state to be distributed in other areas. So at some point, it doesn't matter how much we continue to increase our tax rate, a significant portion of that money is never making it to the students in AISD, despite the fact that we have a huge number, a growing number of underserved kids. So the best way that we can impact that for the future is to go to the state legislature. I've worked there for a decade. I know members, I know staff, and I will absolutely advocate on behalf of Austin to address the system.
Mr. Scruggs?
I think this is a critical issue to especially those that live in Southwest Austin. The city can lead on this. The city needs to get together with the county and public school districts in this area and put our full lobbying force behind the state legislature. The current funding formula discriminates against Austin. Austin will pay, I believe by 2018, more than $300 million to the state in recapture. That's one of every 2 tax dollars they collect goes to the state. That's not sustainable. And I think there are grounds there. The Constitution says that funding has to be equitable for all school children in the state. We're obviously being discriminated against. And if the legislature won't take action, we need to threaten taking action ourselves in court. I think there's a case there. They don't want to go through that again. But we have to force action on this if we're ever going to fix our schools. As far as underserved children, we can also work with those entities on social services after schools and perhaps look at ways that we can share funding.
Thank you. Ms. Bray?
Thank you. I slightly disagree with something that Mr. Scruggs said. And while I would love to be able to say the city of Austin should go full force. We have to remember AISD has a board of trustees. We should partner with AISD and help them move that lobbying effort forward. But we don't dictate to them what they can and cannot do. Yes, Robin Hood is unfair, and the state of Texas needs to go back and figure out an equitable funding formula. On top of that, in spite of that, one of the things that I would challenge each of my fellow candidates, as well as each of the current council, or that will be the current council members, be a mentor. Go to the schools and be a mentor. As an engineer, I love going and doing STEM stuff with the kids. It is so fun to see their eyes open. But that is what we need to do as a community. We need to be involved. I was involved in the Hispanic mother-daughter program called Con Mi Madre now, and it's amazing to watch these girls' eyes light up. Thank you.
And Mr. Pierce.
I think there's a range of different collaborative strategies we can deploy. I currently sit on the Austin Public Education Foundation. I mentioned that to you earlier. We raise private funds to help fill in the education gaps here within AISD. I've chaired the report card task force for the Chamber on Education. So I think 3 or 4 things I think are critical that the city of Austin can take a leadership role in. One is early childhood development. I mean, making sure while we have close to $170 million that AISD will send back to the legislature, that working in collaboration with the district, I think is important. As our community lose middle-class families or lower middle-class families because they're having to move until they can afford it, not only does AISD is adversely impacted by that transformation, but the city and the county loses that tax base. So I think we have a concern to where we all should work collaboratively on how we address that issue. Secondly, what I would share with you by working with the chamber and big businesses, whether it's FAFSA as far as helping young people get ready for school or mentoring. I've been a mentor since I worked at Motorola in the mid-1980s. I think that's a great way to make a difference in a young person's life while we figure out how to work out our relationships with the AISD.
Thank you. Okay, now a question about Code Next, the Land Development Code rewrite that's currently going on. How do you feel that it could potentially impact growth opportunities, particularly in District 8?
Code Next is a hugely important issue for our city. As I mentioned earlier, our current development codes are complicated, confusing, time-consuming, expensive, and to see proof of that, we have owners of iconic businesses such as Amy's Ice Cream and Dan's Hamburgers saying that they literally would not be able to open their doors under today's codes. And that's unacceptable. We like to think that we're this young city full of entrepreneurs and small business owners, but at the end of the day, it's very difficult to do business here. We have to make sure that moving forward, we streamline the process, we make it easy to follow, easy to comprehend, relatively easy to pay for, and that the process is the same across the board. So I'm absolutely the new council is going to be the ones who are in charge of approving the new codes, and I'm looking forward to tackling some significant reforms.
Thank you, Mrs. Troxler. Mr. Scruggs?
This is another critical issue, and I've heard complaints from business owners across the district and across the city about our code system, and everything that's been said about that is true. Code Next, actually, it has a lot of potential. It is a big job to tackle the codes going back several years and trying to straighten them out. It's very vital and important, and it will take quite a while to actually finish that, but we need to be careful. I think the rights of neighborhoods need to be respected. One thing we need to do that affects neighborhoods in the Southwest is make sure that HOAs continue to have the right to enforce all of their deed restrictions. And that Code Next doesn't impede on that. But one area I think that we could help with, the code enforcement and inspection process is broken. I've heard from small businessmen, for example, doing a bathroom remodel, saying that it takes 3 weeks to get the inspection so the bathroom can be used, and that's just because no one picks up the phone and they have no email. So this whole process involving code enforcement and inspection needs to be reworked.
Your time's up, I'm afraid. Thank you. Ms. Bray?
Thank you. The Code Next process, as we've all said, is extremely important, and it's very exciting to watch. The one thing I'll say is the Land Development Code from the 1980s was pretty good, and it was pretty streamlined. A lot of this has been added through ordinances that the city of Austin has continually added, and just layer upon layer. I read a study the other day that the city of Austin has added on average about $10,000 to $15,000 just through ordinances on the price of a house. Doesn't matter if that's north, south, east, or west, that's everywhere. That affects affordability. We have to streamline the process. Currently, we use a process called Amanda, which is a City of Austin proprietary submission process, for lack of a better word. Why don't we do online submissions? I mean, that would be easier for everybody involved. They can review it. It would be great. Through Code Next, I really think that it will allow us to streamline the process, make it cheaper and easier for everybody to play on the same playing field. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pierce.
Code Next is going to present a great opportunity for transformation, and if you haven't already been involved in the community process with Code Next, I definitely would encourage that. You know, when I served on the Planning Commission back in the early 1990s, the process was, I would say, at least manageable at that time. But as it has been articulated, there has been a series of ordinances and policy changes and process changes that have created layers of bureaucracy. It's interesting when we talk about cost of living. A new industry has been created where those who are in the development business will hire consultants in order to be able to navigate them through the process. Well, ultimately what happens is that level of bureaucracy, the cost of rentals and the cost of homes for you to purchase is going up. And if the cost is going up, they simply pass it on to either the renters or to the home buyers. So I think this is a great opportunity not only to streamline the process, and we've done some streamlining for government agencies throughout the state of Texas. So I think that type of leadership is going to be critical in making sure that while we have this opportunity that we do get it right.
And Ms. May.
Code Next has a great opportunity for us as a city with respect to affordability. And depending on who you're talking to, certainly it's also a threat. When you look at the downtown folks and people that live in the inner city, if you will, those folks are very much threatened for a very good reason, because you're talking about a lot of neighborhood compactness. However, I think that it has the opportunity for us to take a look at how we can best streamline those processes that our other colleagues here have already discussed. And it also has the opportunity for us to actually bring forth some affordable middle-class housing stock. The reason housing is so expensive for us as a city is because we're losing all our middle-class housing stock. And when we lose that, everything gets exacerbated with respect to cost. It affects our renters. We've talked about how renters also get affected with that. So I think that while there is concern about the Code Next process as we look at downtown and folks that live in the central core area, there's also great opportunity for us to take a look at it. How do we take that opportunity and make it into an affordable strategy for us as a city?
Time's up.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, and now we're actually going to take a question from Twitter. If you're listening on KUT, you send us our questions, just hashtag it BBD8. This is from Jeffrey Krug, who asks, water conservation results in higher rates, same with energy efficiency at Austin Energy. How would you propose that the city reward good behavior? And we will start with Mr. Scruggs.
Could you please repeat that?
It sure was convoluted.
Water conservation seems to result in higher rates, and the same with people who who go with energy efficiency in their house. How would you propose that the city reward good behavior by its utility customers?
I'm so sorry, I misunderstood you. Yes, water conservation in higher rates is not acceptable. I understand in a certain level why they're trying to do that. It's because the water utility has been mismanaged for years, and they had a bad pricing structure, and now they're trying to catch up. We were asked to conserve because of the drought. Everyone saw the video of Lake Travis. They knew there was a problem. We succeeded. Zero-scaping took off in this neighborhood and many others. Now they want to come back and charge more. I think they're going to have to adjust the pricing structure in some way, but this was just mishandled. The water utility, I think, I'm more troubled with their financial outlook than Austin Energy, because they don't have any cash reserve really left. We need to go in and audit the water utility and see how it's being run and seeing how where that budget's going.
And Ms. Bray?
Thank you. Austin Water and Austin Electric are kind of in a catch-22, where they are selling water or energy for profit, but yet we're told to conserve. So what happens when we conserve? Profit goes down, projects can't be completed. It's just a vicious cycle. In terms of rewarding for good behavior, I would first look and see if to do a best practices review by ERCOT or by the Large Public Power Council. We need to bring both water and electric up into the 21st century. They both need to have their plans reviewed. To me, that is the most critical thing. As Mr. Scruggs said, yes, we may be charged a drought fee because we are now conserving. that, again, just it doesn't, it's kind of mind-boggling to me. We conserve, but yet we get charged. So I would initially start by doing a best practices review. Let's bring us up into the 21st century, and let's figure out how we can conserve water and electric.
And Mr. Pierce.
Thank you. One of the findings that came out of a committee that was appointed here recently to look at water conservation and water strategies identified that we don't have a plan. That there is not a comprehensive water plan. So I find it quite interesting that we can have conservation measures and find ourselves out of alignment from a budgetary perspective when the two don't necessarily meet or find themselves in alignment from a goal perspective. So I think it's important that neighbors should not be penalized for being smart with the way you conserve the use of water, the way you're helping the city meet its actual goal. But I think if the city actually has a strategic plan in place, we can make sure as we're evaluating the actions that we're asking you to take as a community, we also are prepared to talk about the budgetary impact and make sure that there's ways that we can reward neighbors for taking those actions. And I think the other key thing for us is to have an opportunity to look at our assets. It's always a question about what assets are we acquiring and do we continue to need those assets, whether it's land, other assets associated with the water department, see if we can cut rates that way as well.
Thank you. Ms. May?
Well, the first thing that I would do is I would separate conservation from the water utility, because conservation is indeed supposed to be promoting conservation and ensuring that we as the customers of the city's water use are actually learning how to do best practices on conservation. However, when we conserve, as you've already heard from the others, we end up saving money. And when we save money, we don't have enough money now to pay for the water treatment number 4. So we've actually got more costs going out as a result of water treatment number 4 that we built, which we really didn't need, and we certainly don't need it now in light of this drought. So we're having to pay that debt, and that's why they're charging you for your water use, because we have to have the money to pay the debt. Now, how do you take a look at the utility costs with respect to electricity? I have consistently said throughout the campaign trail that it's significantly important that we do an independent audit of all our city enterprise budgets and all our enterprise revenues. That would include the water utility as well as the utility with respect to electricity. So those are the
Fredo, your
beginning
time is up.
places. Thank you.
And finally to Mrs. Trotcliffe.
You know, I think conservation in general is a huge part of making sure that we have a sustainable water supply for future generations. I absolutely support conservation things like xeriscaping or making sure that HOAs can't prohibit someone from installing rainwater collection, working with developers to make sure that the new communities that they're building are taking into account some of these water saving and energy saving techniques. But I absolutely believe that there is a direct conflict of interest between, when it comes to the water utility, between advocating for conservation and then penalizing water rate users when they do in fact conserve. Recently, the voters of the state passed Proposition 6, which set up a state revolving fund for water projects. Austin Energy should make use of that fund. The city of Austin should make use of that fund by applying for money from the state to address water conservation.
Thank you. Okay, a good one here for anybody who's ever worried when they've been going up Mopac and gone past a mountain biker. How would you propose improving bicycle safety in District 8? We'll start with Ms. Bray.
Thank you. And I am one of those weekend warrior bicyclists. I love to get out on my bike, especially in our parks and open spaces down here in District 8. So that's of special concern for me. One of the things that I would look at is really developing policies for, I hate to say it like this, but bicycle riders to be on and off roads. I don't think bicycle riders need to be on major arterials during the peak hours when there's heavy car traffic. Or, I mean, they can be on sections of Mopac, but they can't be on other sections of Mopac, so it kind of excludes Mopac. But I do believe we need to go back in and revisit bicycle usage. I also think we need to expand our current bicycle routes and our current bicycle lanes. Some of the neighborhoods that I travel in don't have designated lanes. One of the things that I absolutely love that they've done downtown are what's called the Sharrow. And it allows the bicycle rider to get into the traffic lane and actually take control of a traffic lane. And as a car driver, I know where that bicyclist is. So that's what I would do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pierce.
I too am an active cyclist. And I think it's critical, as I talked about earlier, from a transportation perspective, that we need to have a regional transportation plan, and I think bicycle lanes should be a part of that. You know, one of the things that greatly concerned me from a planning perspective, you look at some of the lanes even in Southwest Austin, where they begin and end, that creates a safety and a danger issue within itself. I mean, and oftentimes it's not continuous bike lane or bike flows or give an automobile enough time to be able to prepare that I may be encountering a cyclist. So not only do I think we should strengthen the rules and policies for cyclists, because they also need to be responsible. I'm a cyclist, we need to be responsible riders. But I think also just the way that they are interconnected with one another, I think from a lack of planning, there's a disconnect with community and a disconnect with the transportation, recognizing that's a component of transportation, that we need to readdress and be better planners about how the two can complement one another. And I think if we think about it from that perspective, versus that one is just one type of transportation, the other is a different type of transportation, but they're both transportation modes that should be able to coexist, I think we can develop a more efficient plan.
Thank you. Ms. May?
Well, I'm not a bicycle rider, but my husband is. He's always out on his bike. He's one of those guys that gets out to the hotter than hell race in Amarillo every year. So that's 100 miles. So you know how hot and how serious he is about it. That said, he's constantly telling me about how unsafe it is out there. And I do know it because I almost hit somebody not too long ago that I just didn't see. So, you know, when we look at bicycles now, it's a whole other world now. Now they're part of our transportation mode. I mean, that's now increasingly becoming part of how people get to work. So one of the immediate solutions that I think we need to take a look at is education. Both drivers, car drivers, need to be better educated about bicycle safety rules and the rights that they have as well. But so do our bicycle enthusiasts. I mean, they've got to be very cautious with respect to all cars that are coming in. They should too also be stopping at those four-way stop signs. That's what happened to me last time. The guy didn't stop and I didn't see him, so I almost hit him. But
Ms.
I mean,
May, your
so
time's up.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you.
And Mrs. Troxclair?
Well, I'm not sure how many of us in Southwest Austin are riding our bikes to work. I know that if I tried to go downtown in the middle of the summer, nobody would want to sit next to me in the meeting because I would be so sweaty. But I think a lot of the issues when it comes to bike safety comes from inconsistency, not only with our bike infrastructure, but also with our bike rules. As a driver, I don't agree that bikers should be able to take over busy lanes downtown when I'm driving my car. To me, that's dangerous. I feel like I'm driving and I'm not aware that a bicycle comes out of nowhere, and that makes it dangerous for him and for me. So I think that we just need to make our infrastructure consistent, and we also need to all be on the same page about what is permitted. If you're a biker, then these are the rules that you're going to abide by, or if you're a driver, these are the rules you're going to abide by, and try to separate those two things so we're on the same page going forward.
Thank you. And Mr. Scruggs?
I've long been a supporter of dedicated bike infrastructure, and this, of course, is the plans where you see separated bicycle lanes or bicycle lanes where there isn't parking allowed when that's possible. That is the safest way to travel through high-density areas on a bicycle. Bicycles are important because they are a safe, efficient, perhaps the cheapest form of alternative transit. And here locally in District 8 and right around this area, we need improvement in our bicycle access just so we can go through the neighborhood, get to the H-E-B, the store, come to the Alamo to see a movie, etc. And how you do that is you build connected trails in a network. The street connects to the trail through the park, which connects to the parking lot and the place that you want to go. Denver, Colorado is a city that has a tremendous connected bicycle network, and we can emulate that. The city has an urban trails plan, which it's working on, and also a safer streets plan. So with no new development, we can build the use of bicycles into those streets.
Thank you. Another development question of a sort. We'll start with Mr. Pierce this time. Do you support or oppose the heritage tree ordinance?
I support it. I think one of the jewels, again, that we have in the Southwest Austin area is protect our natural habitat and to protect our infrastructure. My home currently now is backed up to a green belt in Western Oaks, where my family currently lives. I mean, that's what we love about our community. I think we have to be smart in how we protect our environment. But again, I believe that it doesn't have to be a situation where you protect the ordinance, but yet at the same time that you're not for anything else that you need to improve where you live, learn, work, and play in our community. I think protecting the ordinance can also coexist with improving the quality of life for residents in District 8.
Thank you. Ms. May?
Thank you. I absolutely support it. I love our trees. I just love trees. I think the trees add not only to the beauty of our environment, but they also increase the value of your property and the value of certain areas. And I think the trees can actually have an economic impact for us. I believe that trees also keep our environment much cooler. In the summer, you know, as we all know, you've got tree coverage. You're going to have a whole lot cooler temperature in the area. So without a doubt, I would indeed protect and want to continue the ordinance. That said, we also have to be smart about what businesses and what other developments need. So I hope that as we move forward, if we need to reassess any of these issues, that we address them individually so that we can find win-win solutions for any areas that want to remove trees. But I would absolutely want to protect trees.
And Ms. Troxclair?
Well, I don't think you're going to find anybody up here on this panel who says that they hate trees, so I will add to the chorus of I love trees. And yes, they're an important part of our environment and our communities and all of that. I do think, you know, we need to be smart about it. If there is a way for us to build development around heritage trees and preserve them for future generations, then that's great. If there's a way that we can safely relocate trees to another area where they can be equally enjoyed without blocking important development, then that's great too. I think that there can be a compromise on this issue and we can preserve our environment while making smart decisions for future growth.
Mr. Scruggs?
As a person who lost 6 oak trees due to oak wilt, which was a devastating experience, I'm a very big supporter of the tree ordinance. There is pressure in the development community to substantially alter or do away with the heritage tree ordinance, and we see some of our state representatives propose that each legislative session. This is part of the compact we make with living here. I cannot imagine certain parts of the newer parts of Circle C, for example, if they would have been developed without the heritage tree ordinance, what it would have looked like. They've done a wonderful job building around these trees, preserving some. Every once in a while, a lot isn't developed because of an old growth tree in the middle. I think that's a small price to pay. I would much rather live here in a place with these beautiful oak trees, which need to be treasured, than live, for example, in other parts of the city where there are hardly any trees at all. But again, they grant exceptions all the time when they're needed, so I think we should keep the existing ordinance.
And Ms. Bray?
Thank you. As the heritage tree ordinance is currently written, I do not support it. However, I will say I do support a conversation. Right now, the way that I have dealt with a heritage tree ordinance, there is no wiggle room. It's black or it's white, period, end of discussion. I will tell you, my parents have a tree that's 6 feet in diameter. If the tree falls down, even if a branch falls off it, it takes out their house. Either which way it falls, it takes out a neighbor's house. That, the city of Austin will not let them have any control over that tree, the tree rules. There's also a affordable housing development that is going in our district, or just outside of our district. $400,000 in tree mitigation right now. That's not an affordable housing project anymore. So with that, I do support a conversation, but I cannot support the heritage tree ordinance as currently written.
Thank you very much.
Richard, I've been told we have time for 2 more questions. So,
Okay, well, here's a good pithy one to go over to Ms. May. What would you do for seniors in the area?
What would I do for seniors in the area? Okay, so the question is, what would I do for seniors in the area? I'd make sure we keep them here by by making sure that we've got affordable housing. I mean, that you can afford to live in your home. So one of the things that I'm proposing is that we actually take a look at freezing taxes for people who are 65 and older. That's what I would do for them.
Ms. Troxclair?
I absolutely think that affordability is one of the biggest issues that seniors are facing right now. Almost every senior that I talk to, when I knock on their door, the first thing they want to tell me about is how much they are paying in property taxes. They're on fixed incomes. They can't afford to pay more and more and more every year. in the form of property taxes. But I think, and I absolutely support a 20% city homestead exemption, or simply lowering the tax rate below the effective tax rate, or freezes, or any other tools that we can use to tackle rising property taxes. But I think affordability is a bigger conversation than just property taxes alone. We're paying up to 17% of our energy bill is being swept into the general revenue, not being spent on providing you with affordable, reliable electricity. So whether you're young or old, energy is also a huge part of your budget, and we need to look beyond just property taxes and tackle every aspect of affordability in this city.
Thank you. Mr. Scruggs?
This is a great question. We haven't been asked this before, but it is a symptom of the affordability crisis. We're losing families with young children, and also seniors now are beginning to feel the pinch. Austin has one of the largest numbers of folks about the age of 55 and getting older, because everyone loves it here and they want to stay. So coming up in 10 years, 15, 20 years, we are really going to see this issue impact us all. I'd say the best way probably would be to keep a lid on the budget, look for effective tax rates if we can each year, keep that affordability down. It's going to be a tough question to solve because everyone is wanting to move here and property values are going up. But again, tax relief, looking at relief possibly on utility bills for seniors, especially electricity in the summer and so forth. We also need to look at programs available for seniors in the community in coming years.
Thank you. Ms. Bray?
Thank you. I think we've all heard the phrase, the terminology, the silver tsunami that may be hitting or that will be hitting in the near future. The first thing I would say is we have to provide affordable housing, whether that's freeze the tax rate or do the tax districts where the house stays the same until the house values stay the same until it's sold. We have to address that. If we do the tax freeze, then we cannot make up the difference on the backs of the taxpayers either through increased property taxes or increased fees. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is I'm not sure how many of y'all are familiar with the recent project that was awarded at the Rebecca Baines Johnson Center down in Lake Austin. But it's a senior lifestyle center, for lack of a better word. It's not a retirement community. It's not a home. It's a place for seniors that want to live, and they don't want a yard. They want a lifestyle center. So I think we need to invest in those as well and really understand what seniors want. I mean, maybe they may not want to have a house with yard and upkeep and stuff like that. They may want the lifestyle center. So I think there's a
Ms. Bray,
multiple-
your time's
Sorry,
up.
Thank you.
Mr. Pierce?
Thank you. My grandmother, who helped raised us fairly well, to remind us she's not a senior citizen, she is a seasoned citizen. So speaking on behalf of seasoned citizens, she's 103 years old, as a matter of fact, and still lives by herself in New Jersey. I think there are several key things that we can do to protect our seniors. One, I think we need to create a lifestyle and embrace more of seasoned citizen type of facilities in our community, that when you look at them, that they just look like they're part of our community, a natural part of our community, don't look like it's affordable living or retirement living, and they have some very nice projects for us to consider. We have to implement a homestead exemption. I think that's a must. I think we can maintain our tax rate at a lower level than what we have it set right now, which would just require your city council to make some very tough decisions. I think when you look at the transfer rates on our utility bills, we need to make sure that the utilities and water that you're paying for is a true reflection of the utilities that you're actually using and not being transferred over for the city to use for special projects. That's what you hire and vote for us to do, is to
Your time is up, I'm afraid.
manage your budget for you effectively.
Thank you. Okay, and our final audience question for the evening is a local version of a very pressing issue at the state level, which is business incentives. When companies come to Austin, some get tax breaks as a result. The homeowners pick up the tax bill. How would you handle corporate welfare?
Corporate welfare.
And we'll start with Mrs. Trockler.
You know, I think the best approach to having a thriving community and to having everybody on the same playing field and giving everybody the same opportunities is to have low tax environment and predictable regulatory environment. If we have those two things, businesses will naturally be attracted to Austin. I think a lot of voters right now have trouble wrapping their heads around when they're having trouble paying their property taxes. They don't understand why the city is using their tax money to incentivize large companies to come here. So I think we do need to reevaluate the best use of that tool, and to, instead of picking winners and losers, I think we should have an even playing field for everybody. Make it easy for small and large businesses, existing businesses, as well as new businesses who want to come here to continue to create jobs and provide economic development for our community.
Mr. Scruggs?
The current incentive program needs a major overhaul. It is so unfair and politically unwise to offer multi-million-dollar tax breaks at the same time while we're asking people to pay hundreds of dollars more each year. And property tax, it doesn't make any sense. It's almost as if we never came out of the recession. Businesses are going to locate here anyway. They're coming here every day. That's not to say we shouldn't do anything for them, but you don't put gasoline on a fire, and that's kind of what's happening here. We need to step back, catch our breath, see where we're headed with this, see the impact of the incentives on the overall tax rate. Are we as homeowners having to make up the difference of these tax incentives being offered? Let's see some hard data and let's look at it. Then perhaps look at incentivizing small business and local business. That's where the jobs are created, and that's where I'd like to see us look.
Ms. Bray?
Thank you. I think in today's business climate, incentives are part of the economic development puzzle. I would say that I think the rate of return needs to be understood and explained to everybody. And I'd almost say we need full public disclosure, almost like they do with the tax rates. You know, have a public hearing so people can understand. Right now you have the tax incentives and then you have infrastructure. Sometimes the infrastructure is part of an incentive package and we don't really understand nor hear that. I think both of those items have got to be part of the incentive package and both of those have got to be explained to the voters. I think there also needs to be a small business development opportunity for local and small businesses. We can't just go to the bigger businesses. We have to look at our locals as well. And the last thing is I'd say we cannot let ours get like the Texas Enterprise Fund. There must be an application and a review process, and there must be public notification, and lastly, there's got to be accountability.
Thank you. Mr. Pierce?
One of the questions I think is always important to ask from a business perspective, from a community perspective, is what is the return on our investment? And I think anytime that we're looking at incentives, that should be the core question that we ask. Incentives, I think, can add some value. As we know, the economy is cyclical. And I know from serving on the Chamber Education Council, unfortunately, every young person is not going to graduate from college. You're going to have some young people that are going to go to ACC and get a 2-year degree, have some young people who are going to get a certificate. So it's important for us, and the way I would want to redirect where I think there's a gap in our portfolio is attracting low-tech and no-tech type of clean industries to this community. So folks who are not, their DNA is not set for a 4-year institution, we can provide them with job opportunities that they can make an honest living and be able to be a tax contributing citizen here in our community. And I think that would help us out with the affordability issue by making sure we're providing the right type of jobs on the supply side to be able to ensure that these families can stay, pay their taxes, attend our schools, and be a vibrant part of our community.
And finally, Ms. May.
You know, we've talked about affordability, but what we haven't talked about is the growth of this community. And the growth of this community has actually affected affordability. And bringing or having business incentives has contributed to the growth of this community. So one of the things that I would say is, instead of having incentives, why don't we flip the question around and say, why can't we have growth pay for itself? And what do I mean by that? I'm talking about having impact fees. Why can't the city of Austin begin to have impact fees on new developments? Instead of having you and I be paying for it out of our tax rate, out of the actual taxes that we're paying the city, have the actual businesses pay for the water lines that are going in there, pay for the infrastructure that's going in there. That's what we need to be asking ourselves. So no longer should we be talking about incentives. We should be talking about having growth pay for itself.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for answering the questions from the audience. I'd like to thank the audience members who contributed those questions, and also the many of you that we didn't get to. We only had so much time. Now back over to Shannon.
All right, Richard, thank you so much. That's going to do it for tonight. Early voting, remember, begins October the 20th, and we want to thank the candidates, of course. Thank you all very much for being here tonight. And a very special thanks to our host, the Alamo Draft House, and to you all for coming, and of course to all of those who are watching or listening at home. For our media partners at KUT, the Austin Monitor, the Austin Chronicle, and Univision, I'm Shannon Wolfson with KXAN. Good night.